advanced level and grade 5 scholarship exams to be held as planned. Special arrangements in areas under quarantine. China assures the President and the Prime Minister of continuous support for development and overcoming international challenges. Indian Prime Minister Modi is spoon-feeding us on internal affairs, an allegation from State Minister Sarath Weerasekara. Mahinda Rajapaksa wrote to George Bush requesting for the MCC agreement. MP Dr. Harsha's revelation in Parliament. Vidura Vikramanayaka's stance on the 20th Amendment.
විසිවැනි ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය පිළිබඳ හෘද සාක්ෂියට එකඟව අපි තීරණයක් ගන්නවා. හැබැයි ඒ ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨාධිකරණ තීන්දුව ලැබුණට පස්සේ.
Good evening and welcome to Prime Time News, coming to you live and direct from the Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. I'm Bernadine Chai Singha. Let's now take a look at local news. The number of COVID-19 patients from the Binuwangoda cluster has increased to 1,069. 16 new cases were reported today. The 16 new cases include 2 employees at the Brandex factory, 11 of their close associates, and 3 people suspected of being close associates.
What happened at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children?
A 10-month-old infant receiving treatment at the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children tested positive for COVID-19. The director of the hospital, Dr. G. Vijay Surya, said that the infant has been transferred to the IDH. The infant was initially admitted to the Lady Ridgeway Hospital the day before yesterday. The family of the infant are residents of Minuwangoda. Dr. G. Vijay Surya also said that a child who was receiving treatment at the hospital for 2.5 months and his father had also tested positive for the virus. They were temporarily residing in Kotigawata.
Were 2 wards at the Horana Base Hospital closed down?
Ward number 5 at the Horana Base Hospital has been closed down and ward number 9 has been quarantined. Medical superintendent in charge of the hospital, Dr. Ayanti Jayawardena, said that the wife of an employee at the Brandex factory in Minuwangoda had served as a nurse in ward 5.
What has happened at the Watupitiwala investment zone?
This patient was reported against the backdrop where the institution was informed not to allow anyone suspected to have contracted the virus to enter. The Vatupetia Investment Promotion Zone was ready for this as his wife had tested positive for the virus. 123 PCR tests were conducted. 123 PCR tests were conducted today.
PCR පරීක්ෂණ 123ක් සිදු කරා.
I don't think that we should come to conclusions that this virus is spreading and it is out of control. I think that we can overcome this battle with the support of the public. If we follow health guidelines, it is not impossible to overcome this COVID wave.
The number of COVID-19 cases in the country yesterday was quite low compared to other days. This was because we immediately conducted PCR tests on all staff members of Brandex. We are now identifying the close contacts of the staff members and conducting PCR tests on them as well. So far, we have conducted over 320,000 PCR tests in Sri Lanka. Around 6,000 PCR tests were conducted across the country within the course of yesterday. However, we are still unsure if the virus has spread among society. We are currently working on expanding the hospital capacity as well. Approximately 2,000 beds have already been arranged to treat patients. If the need arises, we have the capability to increase the number to 3,000 as well.
The number of beds required to be allocated for the ICU is 20% of the total number of beds in the hospital. Since most of us are asymptomatic, the percentage allocated is actually less than that. Arrangements have been made to utilize these beds at any given moment. In addition to that, the Ministry of Health also possesses around 700 more beds. They are currently allocated for other patients. But if the number of patients rises exponentially, these beds will have to be used.
What will happen to the Grade 5 Scholarship Exam and the GCE Advanced Level Exam?
Special arrangements have been put in place for areas that are under quarantine. This morning, additional examination centres were established.
Children can sit for their Grade 5 scholarship examination at these locations. The Galahitiava Madhya Mahavidyalaya has been named as the examination centre for Ganemulla. For children in areas areas under the purview of the Yakkala, Gampaha and Veerakula police divisions. The examination centre will be the Miriswatta Kepetipola Mahavidyalaya. For Kirindivela, it will be the Kirindivela Madhya Mahavidyalaya. For Valiveria and Malwatu Hiripitiya, it will be the Valiveria Madhuma Bandara Mahavidyalaya. For Dompe and Pugoda, it is the Dekatana Padma Mahavidyalaya. For areas under the Nittambua and Veyangoda Police Division, the examination centre will be at the Veyangoda President's College. For Mirigama and Pallevela, it will be the DSA Nanayaka National School in Mirigama. For Minuwangoda, it will be the President's College in Minuwangoda. For Dulapitiya, it will be the Jnanodaya Madhya Mahavidyalaya in Dulapitiya. For the areas falling under the purview of the Sidua Police Division, the examination centre will be at the Ravismara Mahavidyalaya in Sidua. For Jayala and Khandana, it will be the Jayala St. Mary's College. For Kelaniya, it will be the Kirillavela Mahavidyalaya. Similarly, 12 schools have been named as examination centres for the advanced level examination. For Ganemulla, it is the Bulugahagoda Sri Vijay Mahavidyalaya. For Yakkala, Gampaha and Veeragula, it will be the Miriswatta Kepetipola Mahavidyalaya. For Kirindivela, it will be the Kirindivela Mahavidyalaya. For the areas under the purview of the Valiveria and Malwatu Hiripitiya police divisions, it is the Veeravela Madhuma Bandara Mahavidyalaya. For Dompe and Pugoda, the CNAV National School in Dompe. For Nittambua and Veyangoda, it is the Nittambua Buddhist College. For Mirigama and Pallevela, it is the Kalelia Sri Veerakirti Primary School. For Minuwangoda, it is the Kotugoda Rahula Vidyalaya. For Dulapitiya, it is the Duanagana Ranasinghe Mahavidyalaya. For Sidua, it is the Mukulugamua Bandaranayaka Mahavidyalaya. For Jayala and Khandana, it is the Holy Rosary College. For Kelaniya, it will be the Kirillavela National School.
Permission will be given for trains to stop at stations located in areas where quarantine curfews has been imposed. Buses will also be permitted to stop at bus halts in these areas. Buses and trains will only be permitted to transport children to their examination centres. It was decided to allow the children to use the examination admission form as a curfew pass.
A debate ensued in Parliament today regarding COVID-19.
During a debate on the 7th of this month, Minister of Health Pavitra Vanniarachi challenged me in Parliament, saying that she never made a statement citing that COVID-19 has died down in the country and to present it in Parliament if she has made such a statement. I would like to submit this statement she made on the 3rd of September this year, quoting the YouTube channel of Sri Lanka Army. There, she has very clearly stated that Sri Lanka is the only country in the world which has defeated the COVID-19 pandemic. Our medical authorities, the GMOA and the MRI always said that it is not over. But unfortunately, the government convinced the people that it is over until the end of the election. That is why the people took this so slightly.
On the day I made this statement, we had tested more than 25,000 people for the virus in the society, and none of them tested positive for COVID-19. So we were experiencing the third stage of the virus at the time. We were a country that found no patients within society. Therefore, I announced that Sri Lankan society is rid of COVID-19. But I have mentioned in the last few minutes in that same speech that there is a possibility that COVID-19 can spread across the country again.
Earlier, I submitted a statement you made in September. I will now submit a statement you made in April. Minister of Health had said that there is no possibility that this virus will spread within the community. How can you say that in April? Based on what information did you make that claim?
I do not think that the valuable time of Parliament should be wasted on this anymore. Be it April or whenever I made these statements, I made them with the responsibility that with the assistance of the public, we will be able to eradicate this virus. It was your opposition leader who went around the country without any masks saying there is no virus in the country. You also believed that the virus was a hoax. This is why you were so keen on holding an election, and that is why you went around the country without wearing masks. We told the public of the situation we were facing at the time. We have to emphasize that stage 4 of this virus is yet to embark on us. We did not discover patients from everywhere in the country. What we merely said was the actual situation of the country. I have no further answers, Honourable Speaker.
ගරු කතානායකතුමනි පාර්ලිමේන්තු ඔක්තෝබර් මාසේ 20 වන දින පෙරවරු 10 දක්වා කල් තැබිය යුතුයි යෝජනා කරමි.
Right now, over 150,000 private sector employees employed at over 200 companies have been affected by this in the Gampaha district alone. There are about 50,000 employees in the Katunayaka Free Trade Zone in the Gampaha district. About 30,000 people work in Biyagama. These companies are now directing their employees for PCR tests. The employees are no longer going to work. These cases are being reported not only in the Gampaha district, in the districts of Colombo, Kalutara, Kurunagala, Monaragala and Anuradhapura. So I would like to inform the government that this has now begun to spread fast and the private sector needs advice on how to control it. We have come to a point where private companies have to spend their own money to conduct PCR tests. We are of the opinion that the government must formulate guidelines on how to respond to this situation.
අපි දැන් කියන්නේ ආණ්ඩුව මේකට උපදේශන මාලාවක් සැපිය යුතුයි.
People living in the estates live in groups. No one has been tested for COVID-19. This is a serious issue. The government has a huge responsibility. The health authorities have a responsibility. Was the 20th Amendment brought to hide something else? Or was this issue brought to the limelight to cover up the 20th Amendment? Or was this corona issue brought out again to cover up something else? They are also planning to hold the scholarship examination and the advanced level examination. On the other hand, they are saying that a lockdown will be imposed. Different people are saying different things. The Minister of Education is saying one thing and the Minister of Health is saying something else. We don't understand what is happening. The government must issue directives to estate owners associations to clean up all the estates. The people of the country are not clearly informed of any of these things.
Quarantine curfew situation in the country. Commander of the Army, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva, requested residents in areas where quarantine curfew is in effect to not misuse the interim windows given to purchase essential items. The Army Commander requested for only one person to leave every residence to purchase essential goods. This was the situation in areas under curfew after shops were allowed to reopen today. Health regulations were not followed in certain areas. The curfew that was imposed for 18 police divisions in the Gampaha district will continue to be in effect until further notice. Curfew continues to be in effect in the Gampaha, Ganemulla, Kirindiwala, Dompe, Malwatahurupitiya, Mirigama, Nittambuwa, Poogoda, Veyangoda, Minuwangoda, Veeragula, Valiveriya, Pallewala, Yakkala, Jayala, Kandana, Dulipitiya and Siduwa police divisions.
Permission was granted to open shops in areas that have been placed under quarantine curfew. These shops were allowed to be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Grocery stores and pharmacies were given permission to open today. However, these shops were only allowed to be open until 8 tonight. These shops can reopen at 8 a.m. tomorrow. People can only travel to a shop that is located closest to their homes. If someone travels to a shop that is located far from their residence, it will be considered as a violation of curfew.
COVID-19 patients could be there in areas that were placed under quarantine. There is a chance that there are no patients in these areas. If someone wants to leave their homes to purchase essential food items or goods, they can do that. But we don't recommend you to leave the areas that have been placed under curfew. You cannot leave the areas while curfew is in effect. You can fulfill your needs within the areas that have been placed under quarantine.
According to the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment, a total of 67 Sri Lankan migrant workers have so far died from contracting COVID-19.
Media spokesperson of the Bureau, Mangala Randhaniya, said the deaths were reported from 17 countries including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait and Oman. According to Randhaniya, more than 2,600 migrant workers in total have so far tested positive for COVID-19. Speaking on the matter, Jatika Jana Balawege MP Dr. Harini Amarasuriya expressed the following views in Parliament recently.
This amount is larger than the number of people who died within the country, but these are also citizens of this country. There is no doubt that this country as a whole successfully dealt with the first wave of the virus. We acknowledge the role that the government played in successfully responding to this virus. But it was not just the government that was effective here. I think we also have to acknowledge the role of the health sector. The communities that are most directly affected by this virus, directly affected by the illness as well as the consequences of this virus, are some of the most marginalized communities, some of the most vulnerable groups in our society. So clearly the virus does not affect us all equally. The lives of the majority of people in our country have in fact become more insecure, more uncertain and more precarious. I think COVID itself has revealed how different groups in our community are affected differently. That the largest numbers of infected people over the second wave of COVID happen to be women working within one of the most exploited sectors in this country, whose lives during the first cycle of this virus was also extremely difficult.
Sri Lanka's geopolitics.
China has affirmed that it will continue to support Sri Lanka's development efforts. These remarks were expressed when the high-level Chinese delegation, which arrived in the island last night, met with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa this morning.
A delegation led by Politburo member of the Chinese Communist Party and director of China's Foreign Affairs Commission, Yang Jiechi, arrived in the island on a special flight last night. Yang Jiechi, a former foreign minister, holds similar importance to that of a deputy prime minister within the Chinese regime. He was accompanied by Wang Xiaotao, director of International Cooperation Development in China, Deng Ling, assistant minister of Foreign Affairs of China, and several other delegates. The delegation arrived in the country while adhering to a travel bubble concept created to enable groups to travel overseas amidst a COVID-19 environment. State Minister Tharaka Balasurya welcomed the high-level delegation upon their arrival at the airport. Subsequently, the delegation travelled to Colombo, accompanied by a special security detail. The delegation led by Yang Jiechi met with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa this morning at the Presidential Secretariat. During the meeting, Yang Jiechi had affirmed the President that China will continue to stand by Sri Lanka and its independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity at all international fora, including the United Nations Human Rights Council. The delegation led by the former Chinese Foreign Minister had assured President Gotabaya Rajapaksa China would continue its assistance to Sri Lanka to achieve success in its development drive and to recommence talks over the China-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement. He has noted that the Hambantota Industrial Zone project is also planned to be completed soon. The President had noted that China contributed towards multiple large-scale infrastructure development projects in Sri Lanka. He said, though many geopolitical experts claim the project placed Sri Lanka in China's debt trap, the project in fact attributes to the upliftment of the living standards of the people and sought China's assistance to do so. The President has also requested that the volume of goods purchased from Sri Lanka be increased to reduce the trade deficit between the two nations. Inviting China to participate in the Sri Lankan tea auction, the President said that the establishment of a University of Technology was an area where China could invest in. The delegation also extended an invitation to the President to engage in a tour of China once the COVID-19 pandemic has been brought under control. Thereafter, Yang Jiechi and his entourage also met Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa at Temple Trees. During the meeting, the Prime Minister informed the Chinese delegation that the government is interested in accepting investments from around the world and that the Colombo port city is a priority. In reply, Yang Jiechi claimed the Chinese government continues to encourage Chinese firms to invest in Sri Lanka.
I hope we can work together and use our long-standing friendship to rebuild confidence among investors as we work towards economic recovery in the post-COVID years. The government is keen on welcoming investments from around the world. One of our main priorities is the Colombo port city. I hope the Chinese government can help encourage Chinese companies to come to Sri Lanka and create investments. This will help us create export income and as well create employment opportunities for our citizens, especially the youth. I look forward to working closely with you and the government of China to find collective solutions to address common challenges posed by the pandemic including the fight to end this global pandemic and revival of our economic relations.
重视两国的经贸合作。
The economic cooperation and two-way trade between our two countries are win-win in nature. China will actively support Chinese companies in exploring investment opportunities in Sri Lanka and in expanding their investment here. The Colombo port city and other cooperation projects are all very important. Tourism is an important way to bring our two peoples closer, to enhance their friendship and the relations between our two countries. I believe that the tourism interactions between our two countries will prosper again once the COVID-19 is well under control. China is also ready to increase imports of Sri Lankan products, and we certainly welcome the active participation of Sri Lanka in the upcoming 3rd China International Import Expo to be held in Shanghai. I hope that through my current visit, I could work with my friends in Sri Lanka to implement the understandings reached between His Excellency the President and Your Excellency Prime Minister with President Xi Jinping, so that jointly we could make further progress in the development of the bilateral relations, expand cooperation in various fields, and deliver greater benefits to the people of both countries.
The delegation, which is to travel to several other Asian countries over the next few days, departed the island this evening.
A few hours before the Chinese delegation arrived in Sri Lanka, a debate was held in Parliament regarding the Hambantota port deal.
Subject the Hambantota port to a tax deal. The committee comprising of the 3 secretaries decided the estimated value, which was presented to the cabinet afterwards. All of this happened in 2016. The then International Trade Minister and another cabinet minister had presented a framed agreement to sign that was based on the report presented by the 3 secretaries. By the time I was appointed as the Minister of Ports, everything was done. I had no connection to it. The responsibility I had was to present. This is a humorous moment in history. The minister who signed the ports agreement is saying that he had no clue about it and that everything was done when he came there. However, the ports agreement, which brought many troubles to our national economy, is now signed. The conclusion is that there are more damages than benefits.
While the high-level Chinese delegation is touring Sri Lanka, the discussion regarding the MCC agreement with the United States is also being discussed in the country. Speaking in Parliament yesterday, MP Dr. Harsha De Silva revealed that while Mahinda Rajapaksa was president, he wrote to the US President George Bush regarding the MCC agreement.
Take the recently much vilified Millennium Challenge Cooperation or MCC agreement, for instance. It was a current State Minister of Money and Capital Markets who was a champion for MCC in 2005, Honorable Ajit Niwad Kabra. Multiple times he wrote to the MCC. In fact, he, I think, was a focal point, national focal point, before Mrs. Dara Vijaytilaka became the national focal point when he became the governor of the central bank. The then government really wanted to obtain the compact. It did an enormous amount of preparatory work and had multiple meetings, presentations. An entire team worked on it for months and years. In fact, when the then president, current prime minister, found out that the MCC agreement was in technical difficulty, Mr. Speaker, did you know before that he wrote directly to US President George Bush, unprecedented, but he did. President Rajapaksa wrote to President Bush asking him to please give us MCC. I have that letter here. But for cheap politics, suddenly the MCC became the most detrimental instrument, international agreement ever contemplated when it was subsequently pursued by the previous government.
There was mention made of my involvement with the MCC way back in 2006. That was the time that I was the secretary to the Ministry Plan Implementation, at which period my involvement was as the contact point. At that time, we were merely looking at the scope of the overall agreement. We were not looking at the conditions. We only wanted to see what items would constitute that agreement. And that was limited to that particular area only. And we were looking at roads, we were looking at railroads, we were looking at SMEs, and that was all there was to it. But we never went beyond that because there were certain other issues that cropped up and then we did not go through with it.
While the debate regarding the MCC agreement continues, questions are also being raised on if Sri Lanka needs a 13th amendment to the constitution. State Minister Sarath Weerasekara in Parliament yesterday criticised the 13th amendment.
So having said that, let me mention one of the statements mentioned by Prime Minister Modi. He insists on 13th Amendment to fulfill the aspirations of Tamils in the north. It is respectfully reminded that more than 50% of the Tamils in Sri Lanka are living in south among the Sinhalese and the Muslim. So if power is devolved to fulfill...
Honourable Member, your time is up. Please wind up.
...of the Tamils in the south, does that, one bit more, does that mean India is not concerned about their aspirations, or India is convinced that their aspirations already met? India also must study why Tamils from the north in the past years keep on coming to south, because they know they are not discriminated against. Also, the Indian Prime Minister is talking to the Tamil political parties who work on a separatist agenda. TNA is the political arm of LTT, the most ruthless terrorist organization in the world, and even India has banned. The leaders took oath in front of Prabhakaran before...
Honourable Member, please wind up.
LTT killed Rajiv Gandhi, one of the most popular prime ministers in Mother India. TNA has never condemned the assassination of Rajiv Gandhi or...
Thank you. Honourable Gayantha Karunatilaka.
13th Amendment and the Provincial Council's acts were submitted to this House as a bill, in the form of a bill. The then leading Tamil political formation, the TULF, wrote to Sri Rajiv Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, and the letter was dated the 28th of October 1987, and it was signed by Mr. Sivasidambaram, Mr. Amrithalingam, and Mr. R. Sambandhan, who is Honourable Member of this House at the moment. We are a party that rejects the 13th Amendment, and we reject it on the basis that it doesn't even form a starting point to finding a solution to the Tamil national question. But the Honourable Members opposite, His Excellency the President and the Honourable Prime Minister, might be thinking that just because the Tamil people reject the 13th Amendment, that they have an opportunity to throw away the accord. That will never happen. That will never happen, because the accord is something totally different and the 13th Amendment is something totally different. The 13th Amendment was an interpretation, a unilateral interpretation of the Indo-Lanka Accord by the government of the day, and the accord is something that we will not reject. On the contrary, we will hold India account to make sure that it upholds the provisions of the accord in order to recognize Tamil nationhood in this country and to find a viable political solution.
This very government, the government under President Mahinda Rajapaksa, has continuously affirmed that that will be upheld. Of course, he said it in different words. He said full implementation of the 13th Amendment, but did not stop with that. Said going beyond that and making devolution meaningful. The second point that I want to make is that whilst this affirmation is made, and a fourth joint statement has been made a few days ago between Prime Minister Honourable Shri Narendra Modi and Prime Minister Honourable Mahinda Rajapaksa, yet undermining the process of devolution which you pay lip service to continues. The Telipala Hospital, on the 19th of January 2014, when that hospital was opened, and I am saying this when the Honourable Minister of Health is present in the House, then Minister of Health, President Maithripala Sirisena was present at Telipala, President Mahinda Rajapaksa was present there, I was present at the occasion, and a solemn promise was made that although this was a specialized cancer hospital, it will still remain a hospital under provincial administration. And therefore, I posing the question to the government as to their commitment to come out clean with regard to their commitment under this agreement.
State Minister Sarath Weerasekara expressed his views on this matter once again today.
Devolution means delegation of power. We must remove that word from our dictionary. It is through devolution that ultimately we come to a point of dividing the country. We have to carry out a research on the provincial council system. We have moved on as a country without provincial councils for 2.5 years. So research should be carried out to find out whether we have gone backwards as a country or have we faced any disadvantage as a country. However, we see Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is poking his finger into our business. He told us via video conference recently that the 13th Amendment should be implemented. We think that he is saying that because of the power he has from the Indo-Sri Lanka Agreement. But the question at hand is whether the Indo-Sri Lanka Agreement is relevant to this present date, because there are various conditions in the Indo-Sri Lanka Agreement. One is people who have been displaced in the north and the east have to be reinstated if they have to cast their franchise. How many Sri Lankans and Muslims were there in the north? There is no one at present. We have to reinstate them too. That India could not do. cessation of hostility. India has a responsibility to prevent the revival of terrorism, but they did not do it. Also disarming, they did not do that. Finally, as a result of all these, we lost 29,000 lives and 14,000 war heroes were disabled during the humanitarian operation. Therefore, what is the validation of the Indo-Sri Lanka agreement if India is not fulfilling its responsibilities?
ඉන්දියාවෙන් කරන්න තියෙන කටයුතු ඉන්දියාව විසින් කළේ නැත්නම් ඒ කිවිසුම තවදුරටත් බලපානවාද කියන එක තමයි ප්‍රශ්නේ.
Historians have always shown that our fate is not created internally. Our fate is created through external forces. Is our fate decided based on the impact of the Indian region or its internal affairs? Our fate is being designed based on the disputes of world superpowers and their positioning. What's more important than what the kings and leaders are saying and doing inside our internal bubble is how we can integrate with the competition that's coming from the Indian region. There is a cold war between America and China to take hold of world leadership. That is new and is something that we need to understand. If the Republican Party wins the election, the situation could get more tense. And if the Democratic Party wins, the situation will direct to a different course. We are a core part of this Cold War. The other aspect we need to take into consideration is our connection with India. Another important equation is the discussion between Mahinda and Modi regarding the 13th Amendment. We are at the point where these equations meet. India was never a part of the race to grab hold of the world's leadership. For the first time in history, now India is part of the Quad, an organization which includes America, Australia and Japan, which means now it's a Cold War and we are in the middle of it. In a never-seen-before scenario, the US and Chinese delegations blackguard each other. Both countries are telling the international community to be on the lookout for the other country. These are statements made in a Cold War. Sri Lanka has become a battleground for an oral battle. Even though this is the reality, it is not a favorable condition.
You're watching Primetime News. Let's now cross over to a short commercial break.
This is ours. Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone. $517,000 square kilometers of beautiful open ocean. Our greatest resource. 8 times our landmass. This is the Sea of Sri Lanka.
Welcome back to the news. What is happening to the 20th Amendment? The Supreme Court is due to communicate their determination to the Speaker of Parliament. Afterwards, the second reading will take place in Parliament. The certain provisions of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution were criticised even by a member of the current government. State Minister Vidura Wickramalayaka spoke about this at a media briefing held today.
Members of my family need not teach me about politics. I am surprised that there is even a person like that. We do not wash the dirty clothes of our family out in the open. We will decide on the 20th Amendment to the Constitution while being true to our conscience after the Supreme Court delivers their determination. But if the same 18th Amendment is brought under the guise of the 20th, one of the main reasons for the people to reject us was the 18th Amendment to the Constitution. We should not move backwards. The people of this country asked for a new constitution. They do not want to plaster the existing one. Commissions are plasters. Committees are plasters. Instead of these things, there should be a broad discussion in the country about a new constitution. It should not be a constitution that is drafted to suit the needs of a person or a small group of people. That is the promise that we gave, to give the people a new constitution. That is why we asked for a 2/3 majority. A decision on if I would vote for or against it will be taken after the Supreme Court delivers its determination. This has been tabled in Parliament. A decision will be taken after the second reading. Then we will vote either for it or against it. I will let you know. I am still analysing the 20th. I told you my stance is that we do not need an amendment to the constitution. We need a new constitution. Is anyone speaking about the bond scam now? Is anyone speaking about the April 21st attacks? The suspects involved in the April 21st attacks are being produced in court, but they are being released. How are these people being released? As representatives of the government, this is a problem for us as well. This is not what the people of the country voted for. These things have not come out as yet. But looking at the things that are happening, we, together with the public, are suspicious as to whether several deals have been struck. The Mahasangha, the Cardinal and the people of the country are all suspicious about it. This is where the people start to get frustrated about the government. We are criticizing these actions, not to break the government, but to build it.
A memorandum of understanding was signed between the Afghan High Commission in Sri Lanka and Professor Gamini Kirabella at the International Relations think tank yesterday.
This Memorandum of Understanding aims to strengthen ties and define the terms of cooperation between the Regional Centre for Strategic Studies and Afghan Institute for Strategic Studies, located in Kuala Borja, Kharta Parwan, Kabul, Afghanistan, in order to establish partnership, foster dialogue, develop a network of non-governmental policy thinkers in the Middle East, South Asia and Southeast Asia, and enhance mutual understanding of approaches to transnational security issues and challenges in these regions. Afghan Ambassador Ashraf Haidari delivered brief remarks where he elaborated on the importance of the MOU, advancing knowledge exchange and research cooperation on issues of shared interest and concern in regional and global contexts with implications for Afghanistan and Sri Lanka.
With that, we wrap up Primetime News. I'm Bernadine Chai Singha and the interpreter for tonight is Taraka. Good night. Take care.